And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTK.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side, and joining us as they do every single Thursday to give us the perspective from the blogosphere on the Maize and Blue. Our good friends from the MGoBlog atmosphere, the MGoBlog environment, the MGoBlog crew, starting with the man who started it all at MGoBlog, Brian Cook. Brian, good morning. How are you?
I'm well.
Glad that you could join us. And the number 2 over at MGoBlog, Seth Fisher. How are you?
I'm great. I've rediscovered sleep.
All right. I hear you. That's a great thing about this time of year, right? Able to get a little more sleep. And then, I don't know, is this like, our version of Devin Gardner now? And folks,
I am Devin Gardner.
Screen, but I'm talking about Craig Ross channeling his Devin Gardner. Look, DG was wondering if his style was going to rub off on someone. The Devin Gardner style rubbing off on Craig Ross.
I'm walking around town wearing the stupidest hat I can find. and so I'm channeling my inner Devin.
Hey, man, you can't credit that style of Devin Gardner. That's Eddie Murphy from Coming to America.
Okay, just as good. But I have to say, we were talking off the air, Sam, about how difficult it is to do your role or Ira's role in these things, because to some extent, it's like herding cats. And Brian does a pretty good job, a very good job actually on Sunday, and Dave Nasternak in his hockey broadcast with Alex Drain is doing pretty well. But what you and Ira do is genius. And 2 weeks ago, Brian brought up this absolutely idiotic point about
I've never heard Brian called idiotic on this show.
I'm not calling Brian idiot.
It's gone the other way.
Brian is a genius in my mind. But this point was about the gastronomic habits of old world crocodiles. Now, I cannot tell you.
Wait, what?
The gastronomic. Well, he was talking about.
No, Craig, you were the one talking
about.
No,
it was Brian. He was talking about the
not Brian.
It was Brian talking about the gastronomic habits of old world. And then last week, when you were gone, Sam, he tried to bring up this story about this guy who inherited a Bigfoot head, and had it in his freezer since 1953. And so I'm thinking, I'm not sure how that's relevant to football, but it is relevant to a game that Brian always likes to play when you go into his house. You go to his house and you can't get in unless you say, name 3 people who've never been in my kitchen. And so I would generally think that would be either Trotsky or Tofram Lysenko or Rudolph Virchow. But if you got very clever and said, hey, I'll bet Bigfoot has never been in Brian's kitchen, that would be a mistake because he'd open up the freezer. So that's it. But
your inner Devin Gardner is weird, man.
Craig, you couldn't have made it as a car salesman, man, because you people come in to buy a car, you sell them a toaster. I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out where all that came from, but I'm sure when I go back and I watch this over again, I'll figure it out.
You will. You'll figure out how a Bigfoot head being in your freezer since 1953 is exactly like Michigan football and the people who've never been in your kitchen.
I thought maybe there was going to be some weird Wisconsin Jeffrey Dahmer reference in there. we were going to get to the Badgers somehow, some way. But we never got there. We will talk about the Big Ten West and some of their hirings coming up, because I thought that's maybe where you were going with that. But let's start.
Yeah, I was.
Let's start first with Michigan football. And guys, we've had a little more time to digest TCU as an opponent, right? To look deeper into the Horned Frogs and what they bring to the table. And while Michigan is universally favored in this game, I'm curious as to whether or not your view of them in this matchup has changed or evolved in any way now that you've looked deeper into them, starting with you, Brian.
Well, I mean, they got in a lot of close games. They had a lot of very strange finishes. They had that Drew Dillio power slide field goal to beat Baylor, and they've been good, but they haven't been dominant, So Georgia has been dominant for most of this year. Michigan has been dominant, and TCU has just kind of muddled along. But I mean, they have like a super-sized version, not super-sized, like a power mushroom version of Sean Clifford and Max Duggan, their quarterback. So 30 touchdowns this year, just 4 interceptions. And when it came down to real crunch time against TCU, he was running the ball every play. And Michigan's had some issues containing quarterbacks this year. And they're going to have to really keep an eye on that, because Duggan is not just the guy who's going to scramble to run. He's going to scramble to throw downfield much of the time. So just keeping him in the pocket and containing him is going to be important.
Seth?
Yeah, I mean, Sonny Dykes is more, more leech than he is his father. He is like, he's a swashbuckler. He never played football, and he does the things that we always are annoyed that Michigan doesn't do, like just chuck the ball up to your receiver if you get one-on-one. Like, they play a lot of backyard football. They're going to do a lot of option routes. They're really good at finding ways to get the ball to Quentin Johnson, or at least let him make plays. I think Michigan, if Will Johnson continues playing the way he's been playing the last couple of weeks, that's the equalizer. That's the kind of thing that TCU struggled with. When you have a guy who can just man up their best players, Duggan can sit back there and escaping, like Brian said, he's going to make plays. That guy he's a gamer, and that's the way they like to play. But Michigan's actually been pretty good, because that's how their defense is designed, right? Like, we're just going to slowly compress the pocket and get you in there. And that worked really well against Penn State. And then defensively, they're really built for the Big 12. So they run 3 safeties out there all the time. I try to find some tape, and Alex and I are still going back and forth trying to find some tape of them playing somebody who's willing to play 2 tight ends, because they're out in the Big 12. And they get in these tight games where they probably should be losing by more. They have a tiny little cornerback who, if Michigan wants to toss the ball up to one of their big receivers, please. I don't know how they're going to match up against tight ends, because I haven't really seen them play against tight ends. They do have a good linebacker in Johnny Hodges that I like, and that's all I've seen. They don't really get a lot of natural pressure, so I think that if JJ's moved along again, Michigan's kind of found the answer to this later in the season as JJ's come along and JJ's turned into a guy who can go and win you some games. I think that we have the guys to beat them, especially if Donovan Edwards is healthy again. So there's my take.
Yeah, I thought it was that Michigan would probably have an easy time in this game, but then, part of that is just looking at the scores. They gave up 34 points to SMU, 31 to Kansas, 40 to Oklahoma State. They gave up 28 points to K-State twice and lost one of those. And they gave up 28 to Baylor and won that one 29-28. So I thought, this is a team we should beat. But then I looked at the numbers that are meaningful to me, which is net yards per pass attempt, and they're damn good. Especially on offense. And so if you assume that the competition has been reasonably flat between Michigan and TCU, I don't know if that's right or not. I don't think they've played anyone as good as Ohio State, and I doubt if they've played anyone as good as Penn State. But if you just look at that, Michigan's 4.5 points better. Which isn't as much as I thought I would see. And I think the line started at 10 and immediately came down, or pretty quickly came down to 7 or 7.5. So on a sort of macro stat basis, I still like Michigan, but not quite as much as I thought I would. And it seems that their quarterback, and they have a wide receiver who might be just about as good as Marvin Harrison. What's his name? Quentin Johnson, something like that. And so they're formidable. I think they're a formidable team. This isn't going to be a walkover by any stretch of the imagination, but I still have Michigan probably winning the game.
As you guys look at the big sort of playoff picture, a lot of, I get, you wouldn't expect the Ohio State folks to project anything but confidence, though. How much of this this newfound sort of confidence is more hope than sort of actual reason to believe that they're going to fare better here in the postseason than they did in the Ohio State game? Seemingly, there's this belief down there in Columbus that, hey, with everything they saw in the Michigan game can be corrected in the span of a few weeks, and that you heard from CJ Stroud, hey, 2 games. No, he said 1 Saturday does not define my legacy, as if to say,
yeah, it does.
he is going to go and completely
yes,
rewrite
it does,
history.
CJ.
Completely rewrite history here in these next few games. What do you make of the Buckeyes here heading into the playoffs now against Georgia?
I mean, they're still soft. They're going to lose. Georgia's going to punch their face in. The end. That's it. So they got Keely Ringo to man up on Marvin Harrison, and that's the end of the game. Ball game.
You don't buy CJ Stroud being a guy that can be this quarterback that in this final act as an Ohio State quarterback can elevate the team, put him on his back, and quarterback him to a championship.
We saw what happened against Michigan. They put up 23 points, and now they're playing Power Mushroom Michigan. Like, no way. He's soft. The team's soft, and they're going to get their faces punched in. That's it.
I'm a little different than that. I do think Georgia will win. I think the sort of Michigan narrative that Ohio State is soft is a little bit over.
They're 112th in power success rate. 3rd and 1 is a passing down against Georgia. They are not going to be able to drive the field.
I think this is going to be a reasonably close game. I don't think that Georgia's just going to pound them into the.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this, but a different version of this question specifically to you, Craig, because I know you follow Ed Fang a lot, and Ed was saying after the Ohio State game that if Michigan and Ohio State were to face off again, Ohio State would be favored, and I'm like, what did we see?
Well, but wait, Sam. I mean, what he may be saying, and I haven't certainly talked to Ed about this, but what he may be saying is that they may be favored because that's the public perception.
No,
he's
going off a success rate.
Yeah, so I had a Twitter thread about this because I responded, or it was in the game column.
All right.
So generally, if you beat a team with a bunch of explosive plays, that's fortunate, because those are rare. And if the other team is having a consistent diet of successful plays, then that is more likely to repeat in the future. But that's an analysis that is generally true when 2 football teams are playing like football teams, and one of them is not on a meth bender. So if you didn't watch this game, that's a take you could have. But if you did watch this game and you saw Ohio State going 0 all the time, then you know that the success rate Ohio State had on defense was artificial, and their success rate on offense was artificial too. Because the success rate is like if you get into a 3rd and 2, you had a successful play, but a 3rd and 2 is not a good down for Ohio State.
I hear what you're saying, and it's legit. If Ohio State had played cover 2 against Michigan, I think you could see Michigan just grinding out 6.
They would have gotten 2021. That's what happened last year.
Dude,
what they did is they pulled their goal.
The second touchdown, that the post corner or the corner post, from CJ, cover 2. I mean, they just bust in the secondary. Now that maybe it would have been less if they played more zone coverage. They 40 man coverage snaps in that game. Made no sense for this team. That's just not what they showed all season long. And they tried to mimic Illinois inexplicably, knowing that if you go back and look at their tape, the mistake that I think we made early on in breaking down Ohio State was we only looked at Maryland and Penn State, the teams that had success, right? But if you go back and you look at the teams that they blew out, like Wisconsin, you would still see the same bust, but Graham Mertz couldn't take advantage of it, right? So these guys were busting all season long. And you come into a game against Michigan, and then you emphasize the very thing that they're the worst at, horrible game planning. I didn't say they had bad players, but they don't have the personnel. They clearly don't have the coaching to do what Illinois did to Michigan, and we saw that exposed in that game.
Well, I mean, you got Devin Witherspoon playing for Illinois. He's a first-team All-American. And there's no All-Americans in the Ohio State secondary. And to go back to what I'm saying about Ohio State, if you go look at line yards and stuff, drill down stats for Georgia, on defense, they're second in line yards allowed. They're number 1 in opportunity rate allowed. They're number 7 in power success rate allowed. So that run game is not going to do anything against Georgia. And you're going to put it all on CJ Stroud against that defense. I mean, I just don't see it happening. Like, they're going to maybe hit a couple big plays, but when you get in 3rd and 2 and it's a passing down every time, I mean, that's the recipe to kick a lot of field goals.
I mean, unless he's learned his lesson. But I just want
there's no lesson to learn.
We just need to emphasize what happened in this game, right? Last year, they just got pushed around by Michigan. They knew that they couldn't do anything. They did it because they knew they were going to lose otherwise. They were just going to get shoved down 6 yards of carry. So what do? They pulled their goalie, right? And if you look at a hockey game, after a team's been pulling their goalie, they have possession all the time. Their advanced stats look great, right? They have more shots. But every single time you bust, it's a goal. That's exactly what Ohio State did. They were in desperation mode because they knew if they played Michigan straight up, they were just going to get kicked around the building. So what do? They pulled their goalie.
Yeah, and if that's right, and it may well be, then they're really going to get kicked around by Georgia.
I mean,
that's Brian's point, I suspect.
Like, you got Michigan's tight ends; they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Georgia's tight ends. What are you going to do against those guys? I mean, I don't even want to. Like,
yeah. They, you know what? They might fare better playing a more typical defense for them, or more typical sort of defensive, having more typical defensive approach in this game. They'd be wise to. I still think Georgia is heavily favored, but maybe they don't get beaten quite as badly as if they don't learn from what they did wrong against Michigan. It's okay, you pull your goalie, but after you give up a couple, put your goalie back in the net, right? And they never did that. I
mean, at some point, you got to go for it because you're down a lot, but
right.
It's not. It's going to be indoors, so that's good for Ohio State.
Right?
They don't have to deal with it's too sunny out or.
Hey, listen. Hey, Buckeyes. I'm trying to give y'all some tips. Keely Ringo, who I think is a guy, and I've been touting him a lot. But as I've gone back to look at the film, I mean, great athlete, 6'2", can run. I kind of compared his ascent on this draft board to what I saw in Sauce Gardner last year. Upon closer inspection, difference is I really think Keely Ringo is tighter in the hips. Like, if you just try to fade ball this dude, you're gonna have problems. Double move him, force him to sink his hips, make him stop and go. Now you have a chance. So Buckeye, because I want to see this matchup. I want to see Ohio State, Michigan go at it again. Buckeyes, trying to help y'all out. Double move them. You might have a shot. So,
I got a question for you, Sam. Yeah. If Ohio State and Michigan meet again, and Ohio State were to win, say by 7 points on a neutral field, do they even have a claim as to be national champions? Because they lost to the same team at home by 22 points. So what is their national championship resume? That our loss is better than their loss? No, it isn't. Ohio State can't even win the national championship. They need to beat TCU. They need TCU to beat Michigan. Otherwise, Ohio State, the highest they can finish is number 2.
Well, I like that theory, Seth, but I don't think it's going to work out that way in the minds of the public or the,
I'm going to talk it into existence because I think the AP still gets to. Is the AP locked into the national championship, or can they still kind of go off their own? Can they still go rogue like they did against USC did with USC one time?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Let's talk it into existence now.
It shall be interesting. I can't wait though let's this long term or project out this year's Michigan Georgia match? We get that question a lot, and we've addressed it. We haven't delved too deeply into it because there's an opponent before that. But let's, for the sake of our argument, guys, how would you see that matchup this year? How would you see the Michigan Georgia matchup this time around going?
Their defense is less generational. It's still very good, of course, but you lose 5 first-round picks, you're going to feel it. And they have a guy who's probably going to go top 3 in the draft, and Jalen Carter. We've talked about Ringo. They have dudes on that side of the ball, and then you have Bowers and Darnell Washington sort of fully realized. Stetson Bennett's back. I think Michigan will be better able to cope because their defense is a couple notches down from where it was last year, and you have McCarthy as an equalizing factor.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw McCarthy come in late in that game, and clearly he wasn't ready. I think against Purdue, you're seeing that he's getting there. I don't want to equate the two defenses, but when you have his legs and in a national championship game, I think you're going to see a heavy dose of them. That evens up numbers in the box. It makes it harder for you to play your coverages. It's just, the kind of thing where you can see one guy sort of make up for a talent deficit that is real. And then the other thing is I think Michigan's offensive line is better this year. And I think that last year they really had trouble trying to do anything against Georgia. I don't think it would be that lopsided. I think they'd be able to do some things on the ground. Not as easily as they've done it against anybody else on the schedule, but I think it would be considerably more competitive.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys think?
I tend to agree with that. I think Georgia will be favored in the game by the bookies and in the public's mind. But I think Michigan is a better team than they were last year. I agree with Brian that Michigan's offensive line is a bit better. I think while we don't have the dynamic pass rushing on the outside that we had last year, they weren't really much of a factor in last year's Georgia game. And in fact, I think overall this defense may be more suited to sort of keep Georgia under some semblance of control. So while I think Georgia will be the favorite and deserve to be the favorite, I think this is a game that Michigan, in Sam's word, has at least a puncher's chance in. And I wouldn't say no, we're going to lose this game. I don't feel that way. I feel that this is a game Michigan might win. Give us a extra turnover, something weird happening, and I could see Michigan winning the game.
Yeah, rough transition before we get to the break. Big Ten West guys, your coaching turnover when Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, Rule at Nebraska, and now Ryan Walters at Purdue. You got Kate McNamara and Eric All at Iowa. Do you have more respect for the West given all the moves that we've seen made in the West here in the last month or so?
Well, it's going to take some time for those coaching hires to take root, but I think that's 3 for 3, right? Like, I think Rule is pretty much the best case scenario for Nebraska. I think Fickell's the best case scenario for Wisconsin. I think Ryan Walters is a really smart hire. I mean, what he's done with that defense, he's 34 or something? 36. He'll be able to recruit, African-American. I mean, that's a big deal, especially for a team that needs some sort of visibility. Iowa, I don't really see it because it's still Brian Ferentz and all of their receivers transferred. I think literally all of their scholarship receivers are out. So you can put Eric All on that team, and yeah, they'll have tight ends, but they had tight ends this year.
Well, Kay said he's going to show he's going to prove that I'm not a game manager. I'm more than a game manager.
Well, he's going to have to be more than a game manager to move that offense down the field.
I mean, anyone talking about their offensive line? Because their offensive line has been terrible. And when Iowa was good, they had great offensive lines. And they had a major problem at offensive line last year. And then Cade, the few times we got to see him this year was when the line was not good for some reason. It was a very small sample, but I mean, he's he needs to see it ahead of time, and he needs to be able to execute. And you take away his receivers who are not going to be giving him the space that he likes to find, and now you're locking him into his tight end. Like I don't think I would not have recommended Iowa for Cade McNamara. I think that Iowa is very happy to get him. I think Eric All gets them back to where they were as tight end university if he can play. I don't know how well his injury healed or how well his surgery went or whatever, but like if the maximum they can get out of that is to be Iowa again, and we saw what Iowa was this year.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think Cade is a step up probably from Petrus and the other dude they had playing. I don't think there's much question there.
You would be a step up from Spencer Petras, Craig.
Yeah, well, I doubt that.
It's not hard to be. You would.
But yeah, but they are better.
Maybe he's channeling his inner Devin Gardner.
Yeah, they are better with Cade, and I think Eric All's a fine player. I'm not sure he's a lot better or much different than Laporta. I think Laporta's gone, isn't he? And so yeah, I think they've improved with those transfers, but overall, I'm not sure they're a significantly better team. I think that Illinois is perhaps going to become a really good team out in the West, and Purdue in the long term may improve too. But I don't see the bigger improvement will be in the West will be in 24 and 25 when they get UCLA and USC. I don't know how the Big Ten is going to piece all that together, but that seems like a bigger
here's my thing. I actually would have recommended Iowa for. I think it's a good spot for him. Now, if you want to be more than a game manager, I wouldn't recommend Iowa because that's what they want the quarterback to be, right? I mean,
right.
Wisconsin is right there, man.
Yeah, you don't get receivers, right? You aren't taking downfield shots to receivers. You're going to be heavy play action to tight ends. You're going to run the football and play to your defense. That's who you are if you're the Iowa quarterback. So I actually think that's a good situation.
I mean, it's hypothetically a good situation, but that offense was so broken last year, and that wasn't all on Spencer Petras, right? Like Spencer Petras is not a good quarterback, but they couldn't run the ball at all. They couldn't protect. Their wide receivers were terrible, and now they're gone. So, I mean, if I was Cade McNamara, I would have searched for a team that has one wide receiver you can throw the ball to. I mean, Aiden O'Connell's done at Purdue. I would have looked that up pretty heavy, but
Yeah. All right. So here's what we'll do. We'll get to a break, people. When we come back on the other side, we're going to get the guys, get their takes on a couple of more topics. Of course, Michigan basketball coming off of, the first game in the transition to Dougie at the point guard spot. Little Michigan hockey talk, and I promise I will get to some of your questions. But we haven't done this all year. Been saying I'm going to get some questions from the crowd. I'll get some questions from you, the people, to our guys here on the roundtable coming up as well on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTK, the ticket.
Clear on the radio.
All righty. So there are a couple that we can get to here during the break. This one from D. Tuck says, is Mike Morris gonna be healthy? I think he is. I think that it was an abundance of caution. He has a high ankle. And they held him out against Purdue because why aggravate a high ankle against a team that you don't need Mike Morris to beat?
So is Blake like done, or has he got some shot at coming back? Because
everyone that I talked to did not give that any serious thought. Now, here's what you can't say. You cannot say I can't even tell you that Blake won't decide to come back next year. Like that decision hasn't been made yet. So no, that decision
this is me reaching for my NIL wallet. Where it has
so understand when I mention that, I'm not mentioning that to give you hope.
Too late
to suggest. I'm not saying that to suggest that he's coming back. I'm not saying that, to sort of hint that they're advising him to do that. I think, to me, if you're looking at his best interest, I think you're advising him to go. Right. I think that would be the most prudent thing for him to do. And I think that's the likeliest scenario. But the truth of the matter is he hasn't made that decision yet. At least he hasn't conveyed that decision to Michigan.
Well, I've seen him
going to go.
I've seen him project it.
Yeah, I've only offered that to say you don't know what he's going to try. But the likelihood of it, everyone I talk to kind of like, no. I don't think it's even in the mix for him to come back. Now, will he try it? Who's to say that he won't try it?
So I just looked this up. A third round NFL draft pick, which is where I've seen Corum projected, makes about $850K. We can do that as a university, as a fan base. we can do that.
You take another year off the tread as a pro, and what if his stock declines? You already tried to go on a hurt leg, right? You're adding more hits, more carries. Who's to say that you have a third round grade next year? So do you lose more than you gain?
Does he lose his grade though? Yeah.
Who's to say he's got a third round grade this year? I mean, aside from that, post injury, because as I understand it, it's a knee injury, and if I'm advising Blake, I tell him, hey, make your decision as late as you can. Find out, what your knee looks like. Go to, whatever camp or evaluation process you need to go through and figure out what the NFL is saying. I'm not telling him to come back if he's got a third round grade. Running backs.
Back on radio in about 30 seconds.
Shelf life on running backs is, not great in the NFL. So I would tell him go.
I would too. I mean, selfishly,
I'd love to see him. I mean, he's probably the best running back in my lifetime, and as it's been proven, that's a long lifetime. And at Michigan, and so I don't know.
Good.
Who's better? Who is better?
I go T Wheat. No, I definitely go T Wheat. I go before he was injured. I go T Wheat. I go.
No.
Okay, we got to get back.
All right. No, I don't agree with that one.
Jesus of Nazareth. He was in your lifetime, right?
Yeah, pretty close.
Radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTKA.com. I want to remind you folks out there, I am learning. I'm getting a craft beer education. It is going so well, this education, that the Lions are winning as a result. Or at least I think we're contributing to it, Ira. Since we started
Own it, Sam. Own it.
Since we started this beer tour, the Lions are undefeated at every stop, 3-0. And the Lions are in a playoff hunt now. And we're going to be back out and about at the Beer Grotto, downtown Dexter. I got a favorite craft beer now. Can you believe it? I like the Hop Slam, which gets you there kind of quick. Here's what I didn't know, fellas, about craft beer. It's not like those regular beers you buy off the shelf. I mean, you're drinking some of these beers. They got 10, 12, 14% alcohol by volume. Get you there kind of quick, right? So I always drink responsibly. Going to do the same this Sunday out at the Beer Grotto starting at 1 o'clock. Leo's taking on the Jets. Going to be having a lot of fun, a lot of beer, a lot of ball, a lot of banter. If you want to join in, come out to the Beer Grotto, downtown Dexter this Sunday starting at 1 o'clock. Brought to you by Bell's Two-Hearted Ale. Now, fellas, I know you guys had a chance to react last week to the news that Jalen Llewellyn done for the season. I got a couple of questions now in the aftermath of that. Number one, how is your seasonal outlook affected by the transition to Dougie, who was really, really good in the debut, but you obviously can't say he's going to be what he was against Minnesota every night. So what's your outlook for Michigan now, given him being the lead guard and what you see their point guard rotation being? Starting with you, Brian.
Well, I don't think it really makes that much of an impact just in terms of level of play. Like, Jalen Llewellyn is a better player than he's shown so far at Michigan, but his O rating this year is 91, which is horrible. And if McDaniel's going to hit a reasonable number of threes, if he can tone down the turnovers, then I don't think you really lose a whole lot from Llewellyn's level of play this year. He's probably going to get better. McDaniel's much younger, should get better faster. And then you're really just hoping that one of Joey Baker or Jace Howard or Isaiah Barnes is able to step up and be a backup at the 2, just give you some depth. And I think they have the ability to do that, particularly Barnes and maybe even Jace can be just 3-and-D guys who can play the 2 and just play off ball and it'll be fine.
Seth?
Yeah, I mean, our kind of hope was that they could turn Kobe Buffkin into a point guard because, you need more than one. Doug can't just be out there 100% of the time as a true freshman. Like, Minnesota's not a good basketball
No,
team.
they're not. No, they're not.
And you're going to go up against UNC soon, and you're going to see what you really got. And Llewellyn wasn't playing well so far. His rating wasn't great, but we got that from Devontae Jones last year too. We got that from Mike Smith when he first came in as well. The transfer point guards tended to get better. Now, the true freshman point guard should get better as well. But I think that Dougie right now he's at a 94 O rating, and that's hitting 43% of his threes. If he can convert at the rim better, that's been a problem for him so far this year. If he can cut down on the turnovers, that's a lot of ifs for a true freshman who's not that big, right?
Yeah.
So
he's got to get better in the mid-range. I don't know if you do that, if you can do that in season, but I guess I've been encouraged, and I wonder what you think about this, Craig. One thing I've been encouraged about more broadly, last 4 games, they've shot the basketball at a better clip from distance, which is in keeping with what Phil was saying before the season, that they're going to be a better shooting team. And he mentioned specifically Doug, who isn't noted as a shooter, but he said, hey, man, the guy's been shooting it really, really well in practice. We hadn't really seen it in games. Of course, we saw it against Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, Phil said that, and I talked to Doug extensively at Media Day, and I asked him particularly about his shooting, and he said, yeah, I've been shooting it really well. I've been shooting the ball really well, and I didn't think he was giving me a story at all. And so the last 3 games in particular, Michigan is 26 of 57 from 3, and that's pretty good. I mean, it's really good. The problem has been opposition has been 19 of 38, so they've been 50% against us from 3. But I agree with Seth's point about Jalen is that the last couple of years, Devontae got better, Mike Smith got better, and as the year went along, early in the year, they didn't look really good, but they did by the end of the year, and I think Jalen might have been in the same spot. But now we don't have that. The biggest concern for me is injury. I mean, or foul problems. If you get Kobe or Doug in foul trouble, or one of them gets hurt and misses a couple games, you're fried. You got nobody to play at the point. Now, Kobe has told me that he can play the point. Now, again, I didn't think it was hokum. You saw a little bit against Minnesota. So that's correct that Minnesota is the worst team we'll play for the rest of the year. Maybe Lipscomb, but they're about the same as Lipscomb. Lipscomb actually lost by a point to Notre Dame at Notre Dame. They may be a better team than Minnesota. Minnesota is awful, and they're by far the worst team in the Big Ten. And so that wasn't much of a test, but I think in the North Carolina game and the Virginia game, you saw Michigan getting better. Those were 2 games Michigan could have won. Virginia in particular, they lost that game on the technical foul to Hunter on that ridiculous play, and that pretty much cost them the game. The Kentucky game in London was a game that Michigan had a legit shot at winning, except Kentucky shot 60% from 3. I like Doug a lot. I love Kobe. I mean, you and I talked about this all last year, Sam. We kept saying we think this guy's going to be a really good player, and I still think he's going to be a really good player. And you're seeing some of that, and I love Doug's game. I think it's going to have to be a little more restrained. He loves to reach in and try and steal the ball. He's going to have to do a little bit less of that. He's going to have to restrain his defensive game to make sure he stays on the court, because at this point they pretty much have to have him and Kobe on the court. I have limited belief that you can play Joey Baker or almost anyone else on this team at the 2, with the possible exception of Yo-Yo, but at this point he's barely played. Yo-Yo, I've seen play in that position in Europe, and he can handle the ball. He can play the 2, but I'm just not sure if he's actually ready to play. One last thought is that they're not a believer in these position designations. Jawan and Martelli say, hey, we want a 1 and we want a 5, and then we want 3 other guys. That's it. And we don't look at, and so for them, they may feel like, in this context, Brian might be right. We don't care about 2, 3, 4. Those aren't things that really have meaning to us. We care about 3 other guys that fit around our point guard and our center.
Gotcha. All right. I need, before we get to the questions from the people, want to get a little hockey in, Brian. Kind of a midway point assessment of this team. Give you the same outlook question for Michigan hockey that I just gave you for Michigan basketball. Given how they've started, they had a little illness adversity there. I believe it was for the Minnesota game. How do you see this season going for Michigan hockey?
Well, I mean, they're in a pretty decent position. They're 10th in pairwise. They've played a lot of very difficult teams. They've had some questionable goaltending, which I think is going to resolve itself. And, they got absolutely skunked by Penn State that one game, and then they came back and they won the next one. And that Minnesota series, I mean, they just never really had a chance in that for reasons that were outside their control. And if you disregard that, 12-5-1, that's pretty good. They haven't had Frank Nazar, who's a high first round pick all year. They missed Adam Fantilli for I think 4 or 5 games. So they've been a little shorthanded, and they've come through pretty well. And the thing about Michigan is they're the youngest team in the country. So they should get better over the second half of the season. That's something we've seen, pretty consistently for Michigan, is that once they kind of turn the post here, they get significantly better. And for this team, it was always integrate all the new guys, make the tournament comfortably. You don't have to be the number 1 overall seed this year. You just need to get in, and then hopefully you're able to flamethrower some dudes with your talent that's gotten a little bit more experienced. And from all reports, everybody loves Naruto, and things are going pretty well inside the program. So, I think it's a successful first half of the season. And then their recruiting has really picked up. So with all the uncertainty around Mel Pearson, they had a period where they weren't really being able to bring anyone in. Even though Naruto still has an interim tag, they've gotten, I think, 4 commits from guys who you could reasonably claim would be 5 stars in another sport. So that's a big indicator that I think this is going to work out long term.
Gotcha. Let's get to some
Big
questions.
10 is better, though. We should have mentioned.
Yeah, Big Ten
Conference is gotten a lot better.
Yeah, Big Ten's pretty good this year. So
here's another one for D-Tuck, guys. D-Tuck, for folks who are watching and getting questions from the folks watching on YouTube and Facebook. He asks, is Duggan an accurate thrower? Can he hit soft spots in the zone like O'Connell?
So the thing with O'Connell is that Michigan was busting pretty significantly in a lot of those throws. So it's not exactly, is Duggan going to be able to do that? I think it's whether Michigan is able to do what they were doing against Ohio State, which was drop 7 and really confuse a guy. He's a good quarterback. He's much more mobile than Aiden O'Connell, but I think the arm talent is about on par.
Yeah. Different offense.
Yeah. Very different quarterback than Aiden O'Connell. Like the exact opposite type of quarterback.
Yeah, they are super explosive. They have, I think, 13 50-yard passes this year, which is close to tops in the country, and that's not what Purdue does. So, it's going to be more about I think defending TCU over the top, preventing them from getting big chunk plays. And if they're able to hit a couple 10, 12 yarders to move the ball a little bit, I mean, you'll live with that.
Here's one from Sean C. Says, will Donovan be without the cast? I can't imagine that he needs off season. He's gonna get. I mean, we heard his dad on. He talked about needing surgery in the off season. I can't imagine you need surgery in the off season that you're gonna go into a game without a cast. I think
Is it
protected?
Is it a thing where he might be able to wear a smaller cast and be more active in the passing game?
I don't know. I don't know about a smaller cast. I was surprised that they threw it to him as much as they did with the cast, right?
Yeah.
That's a call. I think you gotta try to protect it at the expense of him as a passing weapon, because you need him on the field.
Yeah, you do.
So I'm erring on the side of caution. That's just me. I'm no doctor, right? But I'm erring on the side of caution. I'm casting that thing up and trying to save him and get him as much action as we possibly can running the rock. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I mean, the drop off from Donovan Edwards to his backups is a lot severe.
Yeah, you want to protect him as much as you can. I mean, he has a career in the NFL. I mean, not just because he's a fine runner, but also because he can really catch the ball, and that's a premium in the NFL to have a running back who can catch. So you need to do whatever you need to do to protect him. And I don't care what the game is, national championship game, whatever, he needs to protect his future. And to the extent the cast does that, then they got.
Unfortunately, that's the way to beat Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, Michigan went from being an A at running back position to having one guy who's got to play one hand, and it's such a killer, man.
I mean, it's the one offensive position. Like, okay, I mean, quarterback, it's always great to have a 5-star, but you see how it's always difficult to recruit 5-star quarterbacks. And when you aren't throwing it 50 times a game, it becomes a little more difficult. But running backs, oh my God. I mean, the 5-star running backs should be beating down the door. Did you mean? And that's essentially what you have. I mean, you have two guys in Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards that you beat Ohio State for. That's a position where you get your developmental guys, but you better go get your 5-stars too.
Well, I mean, Blake wasn't a 5-star, and Michigan's track record with 5 stars is pretty hideous.
He was pretty highly regarded, and I know
he was 129 on 247.
Yeah,
right, so top 247 guy, and you beat Ohio State for him.
Yeah, that
for Corum?
For Corum, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And Edwards was in the top 50 for most everyone. So those guys were highly, they're two of the three most highly regarded guys from a recruiting point of view on our offense. So, and as someone pointed out, the 5-stars here haven't worked out so great, Brian. I think.
Well, I mean,
Charbonnet's fine.
Charbonnet.
Yeah, but
hey man,
Green.
Listen to what we said. But that was a price. Jay Harbaugh recruited the hell out of the running back position.
Yeah.
Zach Charbonnet's a baller. Hassan Haskins, who was a developmental guy, a baller. Blake Corum's a baller.
Yeah.
Donovan Edwards, a baller. Man, Jay Harbaugh gets it done. Yeah, flat out gets it done. And so
no one complains about. I've never heard a single fan at this point say a word complaining about Jay Harbaugh. To the contrary, they say we're blessed to have the dude.
I keep wondering how some MAC team hasn't had him on their list. Jay Harbaugh is what you want as a head coach, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, what do you guys think of this contention from Antoine Johnson? Donovan is not an every down back, and he's injury prone. What do you think of that?
Well, he hasn't been injury prone so far in his career. There's injury prone where you pull your hamstring at the drop of a hat, and then there's I broke my hand. That's not injury prone. So I don't necessarily buy that. As an every down back, yeah, he can be an every down back. He's going to be an every down back next year. But I think the way he's an every down back is different.
I agree.
Like,
I think he's an every down back in the NFL. Is Alvin Kamara an every down back?
well, yeah, but
He
so
is
that's
for me.
exactly. So you're when he's the starter next year, he's gonna be on the field, but he's not gonna be in the backfield. What 25-40% of the time, because that's just a huge stress on a defense. So I think you're gonna see Michigan throw the ball more just because it makes sense when Donovan Edwards is your top running back.
Yeah, I think your point is
100% agree.
a very good one. Usage will be different. You won't see. I'd be shocked if you see him in a game where he gets 30 carries like we saw Blake. I know part of it was the absence of Donovan, but even if CJ Stokes emerges, right? I just, I can't see a scenario where, you maybe you're down to CJ Stokes and he's out and you're giving it to Donovan 30 times in the game. I think some of those are throws, and I think ideally for him, even with Alvin Kamara. I mean, the day and age of having a bell cow back, I mean, that's an archaic approach to the running back position, especially when you run it as much as Michigan. You need another guy, right? Which is why I think they're continuing to chase a guy in the recruiting class and why I think they're actively seeking out a running back in the portal. You need to split some of that carry load. And maybe it's Stokes, maybe it's someone from the portal. Maybe they land someone else in the recruiting class. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I'm not writing off Khalil Mullings.
Yeah.
It seems like Michigan remains a believer in Benjamin Hall. Isn't that his name? I mean,
Yeah, it's weird that his rankings kind of fallen down recently.
he hasn't played. He hasn't
Yeah.
played. He isn't playing.
Yeah, I don't think they may believe in him, but do they believe in him to be a guy who comes in and runs the ball as a freshman? I would be surprised.
They'll play a freshman running back. I mean, the guy is. When I looked at his tape, I thought this guy is a brute. I mean, he's knocking people around. Then that was last year. This year, he's not playing. So I don't know.
All right, folks, that'll do it for this edition of the MGoBlog Roundtable. We actually are on next week, so I don't have to, part ways just yet. I can say, fellas, we will get back into an array of things. I have more. I promise I'll get more of your questions. There's a ton of questions for you guys. I apologize for saving only like 7 minutes for it. I'll do more next week. I promise. All right, folks. Thanks for watching another edition of the MGoBlog Roundtable and listening to another edition of the Michigan Insider. Back tomorrow here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan Sports, Ann Arbor, a community.